Every time I turn around, for the past 2 years, this lady keeps talking about there's a war coming. But she's saying it's not a civil war. She's saying it's not a war where the army's going to get involved. And she's saying it's not a war where our countries are going to be fighting against each other. Well, finally, Roland Martin is actually talking about the war that I'm talking about. I'm talking about us being displaced, and slowly, little by little, we Americans have been being displaced. Now, he has, Roland Martin, let me move this back a little bit. He is now talking about Sudan's civil war a year later. Sudan's civil war didn't start a year ago. Sudan's civil war started in my mid-20s. I'm now 56. And he's saying it is the largest displacement up here at the top of his screen. Largest displacement crisis in the world. 8.6 million flee Sudan's civil war 1 year later, Roland Martin. That's at the top of the screen. Americans have been so busy living their lives and enjoying themselves and not listening to people like me and not listening to people like Roland Martin. By the time all this really takes place and it affects Americans who are unaffected and who have lived their lives in America unaffected, these people are going to be on your ass. And I'll be so far into my grave or into my last years, it kind of won't even really matter to me. But by the time I even figured it out, I was 50. It was 6 years ago. I'm running for president of the United States now, but it's going to affect the middle class. It's going to affect the elite. It's going to affect the people who own the Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies. It's going to affect the rich, the moderate rich people in America. It's going to affect all Americans, poor white Americans, poor Jewish Americans, poor Hispanics, poor Asians. And then it's going to filter down to the elites, the college educated. It's going to affect all of us. You all won't hear or care about these things until it's at your doorstep. But I met a guy in Sudan. He was a king from Sudan. I actually used to date him. I forget his name. I don't even think he's alive. And he asked me to be one of his 5 wives. Of course, I wouldn't do that. And to go back to Sudan with him, what a joke. But he got some women to do it. And like I said, I was in my mid-20s when he asked me to do this. Of course, I'm not going to be one of your wives and go back to Sudan with you. I'm an American. And he explained what Roland Martin is about to discuss. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that Americans are going to be displaced and nobody's listening and nobody's paying attention. And all of this is going over Americans' heads. See, so people are so busy with their lives that they really don't care. And this is really not something that people are paying attention to. But the richest people don't live in America, and they need people to take care of their businesses. It can't be us because it costs too much to insure us. It costs too much to provide us with medical and family leave and to provide us with Social Security benefits. And they don't want to continue doing it. So this civil war in Sudan, they can't continue it. They can't continue it. So Roland Martin, I'm going to play a little bit of it. But what he's saying is not true. This started back when I was 25. I believe I was 25 or 26 when I met this guy. And here's the rest of it. I'm just going to play a little bit of it. And I'm actually playing it to put on my channel so I can have it to listen to it when I'm in my 80s.
In the Sudan. It is one of the stories that does not get the same level of attention as what's happening in Ukraine or even Israel and Gaza. More than a year ago, Sudan's civil war began. According to humanitarian organizations, the East African country now has the world's largest displacement crisis. The fighting has forced more than 8 million people to flee their homes in the past year. The majority of the country needs humanitarian assistance, and there's a risk of famine. Groups estimate the conflict has killed at least 14,000 people, but the actual number could be much higher. National security and foreign policy expert Asha Castleberry Hernandez joins us right now. I'm glad to have you here. So, for folks who don't know what's going on here, because people also don't realize that the country actually was split into two countries.
Yes, Roland, thank you so much for having me today. Yes, it was between two countries. In fact, that development was actually historic to me because I was actually at the United Nations when that happened, working at the Security Council under the Obama administration, representing the U.S. mission to the United Nations. So Sudan and South Sudan were split in between the two. And after that development, unfortunately, Omar Bashir, the head of the leadership of Sudan, just continued to pursue oppressive policies against South Sudan, exacerbating humanitarian conditions, also create more tensions between the two forces, which is RSF and SAF. So what you're starting to see.
And actually, as she's saying that, that's actually not true. There were 5 kings between these countries. They just eliminated the rest of the 5 kings. Anyway.
It's just a rollout of all those oppressive policies and the outcomes that are spilling into a decade later, which is, going into 2022, where ongoing tensions between these two efforts, where they tried to merge the two, but unfortunately, the international community was just pretty much distracted with other conflicts, deprioritizing this one.
So, in terms of what actually is the conflict? Who's battling who, and what external forces are trying to mediate or stop what's happening?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the regional security forces, which represents Sudan, is battling the Sudanese armed forces, which accuse them of pursuing a coup against Omar al-Bashir and made many attempts beyond that point. So those two are going back and forth. And what you're seeing in terms of external influences or support is coming from different countries like Russia and UAE, where they're propping up the RSF. The United States even tried to work very closely with the two to call on some sort of ceasefire in terms of the fighting, like you had in April 2023, where
11 million Sudanese are displaced. Where are those 11 million Sudanese displaced? How do you displace 11 million people? Where in the world have those 11 million Sudanese people been displaced? They all haven't gone into the other countries. You got to imagine some of those people are here in America.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken came in and spoke with the RSF leadership to call off the fighting, but unfortunately, those negotiations continue. But again, it lost attention by October 23 because we know what happened in October 2023, which was the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Now, what you guys and she is not addressing with her lying self is that the Sudanese people have been coming here since I was in my mid-20s. Roland Martin, maybe he doesn't know about it, but they haven't addressed all of the millions of Sudanese people that have been coming to this country since I was in my mid-20s.
Questions from the panel. Gavin, you're first.
Asha, thank you very much for joining us and for shedding light on the situation. I think it's really sad that you alluded to it. I mean, I think the mainstream media has largely ignored this conflict, even going back before October, I feel like. So thank you for being here to educate all of us. And Roland, thank you for making sure we talk about this issue. So Asha, I think my question for you is, I think reflexively, we see a situation like this playing out, and I think rightfully wonder what the US, what other countries can do for the people who are in this situation, whether that's aid or sort of other assistance. However, at the same time, we know that oftentimes the way the West sort of approaches aid and humanitarian relief can often be kind of problematic. And so I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts that you can share with us about how you see the role of the United States and other Western nations in supporting folks in this situation and similar ones.
Yes, well, if you look at the recent comments from United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he is saying that there's a lack of funding towards humanitarian efforts in Sudan. So we need more funding. Unfortunately, the reality is that there might be a balance and act issue here where we put more funding into Ukraine, more funding into the Israel-Hamas conflict, and now you have this situation in Sudan. So, but they did just host a donors conference calling on for more aid, and then you have other middle powers like the Saudi Arabia trying to step up their game in providing assistance. The French trying to mediate in this situation too as well. But I believe that there has been a lack of attention in terms of providing more humanitarian assistance because there's so much attention with regards to Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Rebecca.
And let me tell you something.
If I can follow up.
I'll tell you something. They've been letting Sudanese into this country. They've been letting Chinese into this country. They've been letting Jewish people, Indian people, all types of people into this country. They have a focus on the migrants because Trump been out there running his mouth. But they've been letting all races of people into this country since I have been in Haitians, Jamaicans, all types of people into this country. What's the Hawaiians? They're not Hawaiians. The other type of people. Samoans. They're a different type of Asians. They're called Samoans. American Samoans is what they're called. They have been letting them into this country since I've been in my 20s. And so people focused in on the racism about the white people down there saying Jews will not replace us, but we have been being replaced as Americans for a long time. Nobody been paying attention to it. So we are being replaced. And when it clicks and when it hits that the people that were saying Jews will not replace us, well, no, Jews are not replacing us. We're being replaced by other people. And they've come here and they've joined our armies and they've gotten into colleges and now they're judges and now they're in our Senate. And there are not enough Americans, literally not enough Americans that were born and raised here because we've stopped having babies because things are more expensive for us. And they've given them grants, $10,000 and $20,000, and let them start businesses. If you look around and see who owns the businesses, and the banks have allowed them to make money. And what are we doing? Arguing about black and white and arguing about who can have an abortion and who can't and who can have a gun. But I know nobody gonna listen to me. I know y'all not gonna pay attention to me. So finally, Roland Martin, he finally does this because the guy from Sudan who wanted to ask me to marry him, he literally told me this when I was 25, in my 20s, and I'm 56 now, and I did not believe him. And damn, if I'm not 56 and what he said to me is true. And I just discarded him because I said, hey, you're not even from this country. What do you know? And damn, of what he said to me, it has not come true. When I look at the judges, they look like us, they sound like us, but their last names are nothing like us. They're not even Americans. And they're making all these laws that allow the migrants to stay in this country. And I said, oh my God, all I could think about is him. And as I look around me and all my neighbors, they're nothing but migrants that are being allowed to stay in this country on our dime, on our dollars. Anyway, this video is 13 minutes. I'm not going to record all of this, but I just wanted to go live because, YouTube keep messing with my videos because they don't want me to share this with people. But I'm going to share it on Facebook, and I'm going to share. And every time I try to share this information, and I say I'm running for president of the United States, they cut my video and they cut my URL. But anyway, you all have a nice night. But it's just funny to see 17.7 million Sudans, and they've been coming here. Anyway, have a nice night. It's going to be a war.